When I was a kid, I was a huge Toy Story fan. A staple of my childhood was cracking open that sweet, sweet clamshell, and guess what time it was? Toy Story time. This series was part of my life. It was woven into the fabric of my childhood. So it's easy to see why, when Pixar announced that they were making a sequel to the third film, I was pretty nervous. These are some of the most beloved characters in the history of animation, and this film was supposed to follow up on what many people believe to be a perfect ending with Toy Story 3? Heck no. Because it's not like Pixar has necessarily been crushing it recently. Sure, there has been their highlights, but for every Coco or Inside Out, you get a Finding Dory, or a Cars 2, or a Monsters University, or a The Good Dinosaur. Yeah, sure, some of these movies aren't awful, but I don't think anyone would say that they're as good as what Pixar built their studio up on. Movies that are incredibly inventive and original, that continue to push the boundaries of what is possible with computer animated filmmaking. But it seems like recently, the studio has been focused on making films that are a bit more formulaic, and although are, yes, pretty to look at, they don't really seem to stick around as long as some of the earlier films in the studio's catalog. So when it came time for Toy Story 4, needless to say, I was hesitant to get excited for this movie. But what we actually ended up getting was, in my opinion, one of the best Pixar films that we've ever had, and it's a movie that I think is a more poignant and more profound send-off for these characters than even Toy Story 3, a movie that is actually probably my least favorite of the four, which I'll get into later. Now, it's really easy to point to any animated film released nowadays and praise its animation, especially with a company like Disney. Of course, their films are going to look gorgeous, and I would hope a film with a budget of $200 million would look gorgeous. But that's not really what I wanted to discuss today. Instead, I wanted to focus on something very specific, and that is the direction that they take some of the characters in this film. Characters who, in my opinion, make these movies what they are, and it's a direction that I feel is actually surprisingly mature. Now, Pixar has always had adult ideas in their films, Finding Nemo, WALL-E, Ratatouille, and Inside Out being some shining examples of that. But Toy Story 4 does something that I think few Pixar films have done. This film actually kind of raises a mirror to the very ideas the Toy Story series, but Woody in particular, has been pretty steeped in. Now, let's start with Toy Story, Pixar's first ever feature film and the first CGI feature-length animated movie. Now, a major theme of this film is obviously friendship, but also community. Sheriff Woody is not only literally a sheriff, but he is the leader of Andy's toys. They look to him for guidance. But it's when a new toy comes in the mix that he becomes jealous, and well, the rest of Toy Story happens. We see Woody overcome his jealousy and learn how to work with others to get back home safe and sound to Andy. This idea is continued in Toy Story 2, which is actually what makes this film so good. A lot of sequels have their protagonists relearning or unlearning the lessons that they were taught in the first film, which is kind of a waste of time. But in Toy Story 2, Woody is given an option. In the first film, the person that we see primarily mistreat the toys is Sid, a demonic child that looks like Dr. Finkelstein from A Nightmare Before Christmas. But in its sequel, we see this idea, but it's recontextualized in a really interesting way. Although Andy loves Woody and Buzz and the rest of the gang, Stinky Pete tells him that it's not going to last forever. And the choice that Woody has to make is whether he wants to enjoy the time that he has left with Andy or try to make it last forever. In fact, Stinky Pete can say it better than I can, in which he pretty much lays out the emotional conflict of the movie pretty succinctly.
How long will it last, Woody? Do you really think Andy is going to take you to college? Or on his honeymoon? Andy's growing up, and there's nothing you can do about it.
Now with Toy Story 3, the movie asks a similar question. What obligation do the toys have to Andy? Woody argues that they should stay with Andy until he might need them in the future, but Buzz argues that they go to this daycare, so they will be constantly played with forever. And it's really this that lies my biggest complaint with Toy Story 3. Although it is a very good movie, I just don't hold it in as high of a regard as many Pixar fans do, and that's primarily because it asks our characters similar questions. With all that to say though, that brings us to Toy Story 4, in which we have Woody, who is still with Bonnie. But it's not as simple as just being with a new owner. Instead, although Bonnie is quite fond of Woody at first, she quickly grows tired of him and throws him in the closet and literally passes his role in Andy's room to someone else. But Woody takes up the responsibility of protecting Forky, and in doing so finds his new sense of purpose. In fact, Woody straight up acknowledges this.
Nobody wants this.
I do.
Why?
Because.
Why?
Just because.
Why?
Because it's all I have left to do.
See, Woody has always attributed his existence onto who his owner is. He projects this need for ownership onto the other toys, and he actually does it in each film too. In the first Toy Story, he does it to Buzz. The second, it's Jessie. And the third, it's, well, pretty much everyone. If he is not valued by the owner, then he doesn't see any value within himself. Woody feels like he doesn't have any utility, but that is why I love Toy Story 4, because it's a film that evolves these characters, that actually tells one of the most emotionally rich and mature narratives in a Pixar film. One of the most important characters in this movie is actually Bo Peep, someone who in the past was relegated to just being an afterthought. Hell, she wasn't even in the third movie. The prior films often depicted Bo as a love interest for Woody, and it's one that is actually used to fuel his jealousy of Buzz. And she's often a damsel in distress for Andy's game. So, up until its newest film, Bo Peep was the Princess Peach of the Toy Story franchise. In fact, I know many fans of the Toy Story films that didn't even consider Bo to be a toy, because who plays with a lamp? But in Toy Story 4, Bo is actually one of the most integral characters in the entire movie. After she leaves the rest of the gang, Bo's life kind of mirrors Woody's up to a certain point. When she leaves, she ends up spending years collecting dust on the shelf of an antique store until she grows sick of this stagnation and decides to take her life into her own hands. This is the lesson that she tries to show to Woody. Because her life is congruent to his in a lot of ways, Bo is able to show Woody that independence is possible. And in Woody leaving Bonnie, he is finally realizing that his inherent value doesn't stem from what others attribute to him. Woody's life doesn't have value because he's a priceless antique, or because he's someone's favorite toy, or because he can protect the other toys. No, Woody is valuable because, well, he's Woody.